Coming up, India's COVID crisis deepens with case numbers exploding and the health system near collapse. Joe Biden marks 100 days in office with a $5 trillion spending plan to rebuild the economy. And Japan unveils a new rule book to explain how the Tokyo Olympics will be run in the middle of the pandemic. Well, India has been reporting record numbers of new COVID cases all week, but medical experts believe true COVID numbers are 5 to 10 times greater than the official tally. Some modelling shows this ferocious second wave won't peak for a few weeks yet. And just a warning, the story from our South Asia correspondent James Oaten is very confronting.
A nation in mourning. Those grieving outside this Delhi hospital tried desperately to get their loved ones admitted. But nothing could be done. There's no capacity here or elsewhere. Those left behind wonder, why wasn't the government better prepared?
If this would have happened like last year, then it would have been okay. Nobody knew about it. But they got a year and they wasted it completely.
As Delhi enters a second week of lockdown, hospitals continue to raise the alarm about dwindling supplies. Some have come within minutes of running out of oxygen.
Please do something and please release some oxygen supply. People need it here.
Funeral pyres are being hastily assembled across the capital. The workers can't keep up. In Delhi, one person is dying every 4 minutes.
A person cannot live here in Delhi. A person cannot even die peacefully in Delhi.
The international community is coming to India's aid, with hundreds of ventilators being flown in from Singapore and the UK. Australia's considering what it can do.
India is literally gasping for oxygen. We are in a position to be able to supply non-invasive ventilators. We're in a strong position on that front.
At a time of public outrage, it's been revealed Twitter complied with a directive to remove dozens of tweets critical of the central government and Prime Minister. Regardless of who's to blame for this mess, one thing's almost certain: this crisis will get worse before it gets better. James Oaten, ABC News, Delhi.
Well, Joe Biden has called it a once-in-a-generation investment in America, pitching his $5 trillion spending plan to rebuild the economy. This week marked his first 100 days in office, and the US president implored Congress to pass his proposal for jobs, which would be funded by tax hikes on the rich. From Washington, here's Greg Jennett.
No president's ever been so flanked by female power in the most prized seats in the House.
And it's about time.
Then vacant seats were abundant for the safety of the men and women of Congress in a nation weakened by pandemic.
America is on the move again.
In the almost 100 days in his job, more than 1 million Americans have got theirs back, but at least another 8 million still haven't.
Jobs. Jobs. Jobs.
To get the largest federally led job scheme in 70 years, he first has to get through the senators in front of him via the voters who put them there.
The American Jobs Plan is a blue-collar blueprint to build America.
It's a pitch aimed squarely at middle America, but there is a catch: tax increases for the wealthiest 1%.
I believe what I propose is fair, fiscally responsible.
Bold, not bombastic, ambitious but not abrasive. Joe Biden's leading an administration without the drama and the leaks of the last one. It's paying off on the pandemic, but progress towards his social goals of equality is almost unmeasurable. And his economic plans, an enormous experiment in government-led salvation. Still, the president does have time on his side, 1,361 days remaining. Greg Jennett, ABC News, Washington.
Brazil has become the second country to officially record more than 400,000 deaths from COVID. Daily case and death numbers have dropped recently, but a shortage of vaccines and an increase in economic activity have some experts sounding dire warnings. North America correspondent Barbara Miller.
Brazil's vaccine drive is reaching some of the most far-flung communities. 900 people at this remote site got the shot in one go.
The community was so not only happy, but so moved by this.
But countrywide, the inoculation effort is slow and stalling. Even with an appointment, you can be turned away.
I came to get vaccinated, but I've been told there isn't any vaccine. The worker told me to come back next week.
It's an embarrassment. This is a joke. Those bloody politicians.
When he moved to Porto Alegre 2 years ago, Adelaide man Troy Holmes could never have guessed he'd find himself in a global COVID hotspot. He and his pregnant Brazilian wife are scared.
Our daily life consists of this apartment. We are in the apartment 24/7, leaving the apartment purely to go to doctor's visits and to buy food.
And when you go to those doctor's appointments, do you feel in a safe environment there?
No. We are scared of everything. We've been to appointments and we've just stood in the middle of the room so we don't have to touch any of the chairs.
The president is still playing it all down, encouraging Brazilians to get back to normality. Many are heeding that call.
Next month, probably have some increase because all the economic activities return now.
There are now real fears this merciless second wave will turn into a third. Barbara Miller, ABC News.
Myanmar's military shows no sign of loosening its grip on the country after it seized power in a coup 3 months ago. Elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi and members of her National League for Democracy have been detained, and a brutal crackdown has left hundreds of people dead with no end to the violence. Southeast Asia correspondent Mazoe Ford has this story, and just a warning, it does contain distressing images.
This is a human rights emergency.
How many bodies do you need?
This is what's happening in Myanmar week after week, a country where an already fragile democracy has been shattered by military generals and trigger-happy soldiers, and where daring to protest against them can get you killed. The death toll is fast approaching 800. Scores of people have been wounded and about 3,500 have been thrown in jail. Yeah! 39-year-old Han Ta is one of them.
When I heard he was arrested, actually I feel very frightening and also shocked.
For 10 years, Han Ta's been a highly regarded journalist in Myanmar's biggest city, Yangon, working for several local and international media outlets, including the ABC. He and a colleague were detained at their production company office on March the 9th and are now in Yangon's notorious insane prison.
They are not criminals, they are journalists.
Han Ta's family hasn't been allowed to see him since his arrest, but they've heard he's been charged with military disillusionment and communications offences. That feeling of helplessness has spread right across Myanmar. Last November, an overwhelming 83% of people voted to return the government of Aung San Suu Kyi for a second term. The military, which previously ruled for decades, made unsubstantiated claims that the election was fraudulent, then seized power in a coup on February 1st. Hundreds of thousands of people joined a civil disobedience movement and peaceful protests against the new regime, only to be met by violence.
The military has decided that defiance is unacceptable and has basically unleashed both their soldiers and police.
Despite the dangers, the demonstrations have continued, but protesters with placards, sticks and shields have been no match for armed security forces. This 24-year-old father, whose identity we're withholding for his safety, had to have part of his leg amputated. Before he was shot, he'd protested every day for weeks. For those who remember life under military rule previously, watching all of this unfold has been a horrible sense of déjà vu.
It is not just me, all of us, all Burmese. These young kids, a month ago, they showed the world how much they want to avoid violence by protesting peacefully.
The UK, US and EU have imposed some economic sanctions, while Australia's severed all military ties and redirected aid money.
We need to see a global arms embargo imposed ideally by the UN Security Council. We also need targeted economic sanctions. And if the UN Security Council is not prepared to act, then there has to be an emergency meeting of like-minded states to find a way forward.
Well, Olympic organisers have unveiled a new rule book to explain how the Games will be conducted in the middle of this pandemic. The event is less than 90 days away and parts of Japan, including the capital Tokyo, have just been placed under a new state of emergency. But organisers insist it can be held safely, unveiling stricter coronavirus measures, including more testing. Here's North Asia correspondent Jake Sturmer in Tokyo.
Come July, this will hopefully be the home of Australian gold. At Tokyo's new aquatic venue, organisers are holding test events to check COVID safety measures. They've released more details about exactly how they plan to hold a safe and secure Games.
We have updated the playbook in greater detail with the rules to be observed by all participants during their stay in Japan.
All athletes will have to pass 2 COVID-19 tests before leaving their home country and will be tested daily. As a result, they'll be able to skip the 14-day quarantine, provided they only travel between the Olympic Village, training and competition venues.
There's still so much uncertainty about what the Games will actually look like. Organisers don't know how many of the seats in this venue will be filled with spectators, if any at all. They're trying to delay that decision as long as possible so that the coronavirus situation has time to improve in Tokyo.
It's been a challenging thing to plan the world's biggest sporting event. They've changed their plans to suit the circumstances as they start to unfold. So we won't be in complete position until we get the final playbook in June.
Tokyo and several other cities came under a third state of emergency this week, and the death toll in Japan has passed 10,000. Hospitals are under pressure, so plans to recruit 500 nurses to provide medical care during the Games will be a major challenge.
We need twice the number of workers to handle the situation, as we're understaffed even during the day.
Just under 3 months is not a long time to get a surging pandemic under control and convince a sceptical Japanese public that the Games should still go ahead. Jake Sturmer, ABC News, Tokyo.
Indonesia's military has located the wreckage of a submarine that disappeared off the coast of Bali. None of the 53 crew survived, and authorities are now suggesting it may have been hit by an internal wave. Indonesia correspondent Ann Barker.
This heart-wrenching video has gone viral on Indonesian social media. The little son of First Lieutenant Imam Adi tried to stop him leaving for work last week, as if he'd had a premonition he wouldn't come home. The young father was one of 53 crew killed when the Navy submarine Nanggala 402 sank to the bottom of the Bali Sea and broke apart. Grieving families held prayer rituals in Java and Bali. Some took flowers and other offerings into the sea. Captain Gede Kartika's wife is expecting their second child.
We'd already given our son to the government to serve in the military. Now that he's fallen in the operation, we hope the government will return his remains to us.
An underwater robot was deployed to photograph the wreckage 840 metres down, but experts say lifting the sub to the surface and retrieving the bodies will be a daunting task that requires special salvage equipment. Military authorities are working out when and how it can be done. In the meantime, Indonesia's president says all crew members will be posthumously promoted by one rank and given a special medal for their service.
Terima kasih. They
are the best sons of the nation, the best patriots guarding the sovereignty of the country. Their devotion will continue to be imprinted in the hearts of all Indonesian citizens.
The government will also cover the costs of education for the crew members' children to university level. Anne Barker, ABC News.
Well, the campaign against a culture of rape and sexual assault in Australian schools has prompted a similar surge of allegations in Britain. Thousands of young women and girls have been sharing their accounts of violence, sexism and misogyny at some of the UK's most prestigious schools. The powerful testimonies come as the British government moves to record misogyny as a hate crime. Our Europe correspondent Samantha Hawley.
Soma Sarah's on a mission to expose a rape culture in British schools.
It was actually prompted in response to what I'd seen going on in Australia with Chanel Contos.
Since March, Soma's received more than 14,000 testimonies, all uploaded on her website. Everyone's invited.
It's not just about the rape and assault, it's about things like misogyny and sexism and the derogatory comments and these dehumanising behaviours.
Some of London's most prestigious schools have been called out, including the Westminster School that's educated 6 former Prime Ministers. But the net is much wider.
This is a huge problem. It's a universal, it's everywhere. It's in all schools, all of universities.
Since the abduction and murder of Sarah Everard, there's been a heightened debate over women's safety, and it is leading to change. For one, misogyny will soon be classed as a hate crime in a trial in England and Wales. South American doctor Melania Guymont has been fighting for that since she was the victim of a homophobic attack on a London bus in 2019.
When you have misogyny as a hate crime, you are entitling women, basically. I mean, you are empowering them by telling them that what has happened has a name and it's a hate crime.
The UK's first pilot of treating misogyny as a hate crime began in the city of Nottingham in 2016. In the 2 years that followed, there was just one conviction. But police argue it's much more about collating the data and acting on it.
And it's a really important first step for the police to take to make sure that they're demonstrating they're really listening and understanding the lived experience of women every day.
The floodgates have opened. Samantha Hawley, ABC News, London.
The US President Joe Biden has officially recognised the mass killings of Armenians that started during the First World War as genocide. The watershed announcement for the Armenian community has been met with a fierce rebuttal from Turkey, which has called it a rewriting of history. Middle East correspondent Tom Joyner.
In the Armenian capital, Yerevan, solemnity but hope. A commemoration for the mass killings of Armenian Christians at the hands of Ottoman Turk forces a century ago. The annual tribute marks what Armenians regard as the start of the genocide, when hundreds of intellectuals were rounded up in 1915, the first step in the killings and deportations that lasted until the early 1920s.
I think it's imminent that the international community will finally recognise that it's genocide, and it will be accepted as irrefutable.
Dozens of nations recognised the killings as genocide, and despite decades of pressure from Turkey, the US president says America now agrees. Joe Biden releasing this statement, saying the US honours all those who perished and affirming the painful history as genocide.
The recognition by the US will have fundamental importance for human rights and will help eliminate these kinds of crimes in the future and restore historical justice.
But the historic declaration has been met with a fierce response from Turkey. Ankara hit back, rejecting the genocide label, calling Washington's position a vulgar distortion of history. Many members of the Armenian community in Australia hope that the Morrison government will follow Biden's lead.
Scott Morrison and his federal government need to stand up to be on the right side of history. It's important to remember that the Anzacs were the one who saw what was happening during the Armenian genocide, and we believe that the failure of Australia to acknowledge what happened is a failure to what they fought for.
Australia's only Premier of Armenian descent, Gladys Berejiklian, echoed those calls, saying she is forever hopeful that Australia will join the many nations around the world who have recognised the Armenian genocide of 1915. Slow progress to recognise a painful past. Tom Joyner, ABC News.
Well, China is hoping a new state-backed digital currency will be ready to use for locals and visitors alike at next year's Winter Olympics in Beijing. The digital yuan has been in circulation in pilot projects across China for almost a year. It's the first state-backed cryptocurrency in the world to be used on such a scale. But unlike more traditional cryptocurrencies, it will give the central bank and the government more control, not less. Sean Manteso explains.
It was here in China more than 1,000 years ago that paper money was first invented. Now, China is leading the way in what could be the next financial revolution. Trials have been underway since last year in cities across China for a new digital currency electronic payment system known as the DCEP, a digital yuan controlled by the central bank.
Show me. How does it look like? This is the app, right?
The system allows users to use an e-wallet on their phones to pay for goods and services, using state-backed digital money, distributed directly to users or through other payment platforms like WeChat and Alipay, which are already hugely popular.
Personally, I see no difference between Alipay, WeChat and the digital yuan for users. If the digital yuan operates on a large scale and it offers a better deal than Alipay and WeChat, then users will be more inclined to use it.
But this is no normal cryptocurrency or digital payment platform. Bitcoin, for example, was designed to avoid regulation and works outside the traditional system of finance. The digital yuan is the opposite. It's a cryptocurrency with state backing that will be fully regulated. But it will use similar advanced data storage technology that other cryptocurrencies use to track transactions.
Well, why is that? That's because they think that this gives them more control over retail payments and retail participation in finance.
The DCEP could also give the Chinese Communist Party even more control over people's lives.
They can use it to further oppress people. They can use it to prevent disfavoured peoples and populations from taking advantage of the financial system as they would have otherwise.
Some have suggested China's vast CCTV system could be used to levy fines in real time for offences like jaywalking through the digital yuan. Or the central bank could add an expiration date to digital money to encourage users to spend it quickly during times of economic stress. Some Chinese officials have even hinted the digital yuan could help unseat the US dollar as the dominant currency used in foreign exchange and cross-border commerce. But unless China is willing to open its economy and remove strict currency controls, upending the global financial order might be ambitious.
If China really wanted the renminbi to be the international reserve currency, they'd have to open it up. They'd have to abolish capital controls pretty much. They have to make it flow around the world freely, and they absolutely do not want that.
Other countries, including Australia, are exploring whether to make their own digital currencies. The UK this week announced its plans to look at creating a Britcoin. The US Federal Reserve has a joint project with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology to explore the issue. But for now, China leads the way, and the rest are playing catch-up.
Well, the pandemic has upended the movie business, and this year's Academy Awards looked a little different too. A scaled-back ceremony was held at Union Station in downtown Los Angeles. But these Oscars will be remembered for the winners in a year that recognised more women and people of colour. Here's Tim Swanston.
A cinematic Oscars opening. For a year, most new releases were watched from home.
It has been quite a year.
The mixed-up formula, a product of the pandemic. For Hollywood's Night of Nights, there was definitely a sense of excitement.
With the blackest Oscars of all time, y'all.
Many women and people of colour took away the big awards. Judas and the Black Messiah won 2 statues. Ma Rainey's Black Bottom notched a double as well.
I also stand here as Jamaica and I break this glass ceiling with so much excitement for the future.
The Netflix Films Awards bolstered a big night for the streaming provider, which won 7 Oscars, 2 for Citizen Kane biographical drama, Mank. The biggest winner was Nomadland. It won Best Picture, Frances McDormand took home her 3rd Best Actress Oscar, and Chloe Zhao made history, becoming the first woman of colour to win Best Director.
This is for anyone who has the faith and the courage to hold on to the goodness in themselves.
The night wasn't for the Aussies. Margot Robbie's production company was behind Promising Young Woman, winning Best Original Screenplay, and Australian Andrew Jackson was part of a team that won Best Visual Effects for Christopher Nolan's thriller Tenet. It was a subdued end to the broadcast. Chadwick Boseman was tipped by many to win a posthumous Oscar for Best Actor. Instead, Anthony Hopkins won for The Father. Moments before, Frances McDormand pushed for a glorious return to the cinema.
One day, very, very soon, take everyone you know into a theatre, shoulder to shoulder.
A tradition threatened by dominant films increasingly distributed on the small screen. Tim Swanston, ABC News.
And that is the program. More world news and interviews can be found at the ABC's YouTube channel, and do join me on the World Weeknights on the ABC's News channel. I'm Bev O'Connor. Thanks for your company. Bye-bye.